accounted for? What we're going to expect?
It'll be similar to what you've seen, which has just been barely. It's been pretty close to flat funding with just a little bit incremental increases. The bill, what we saw was MAP 21 established was a major policy reform bill. This bill, I think everyone hoped, was going to be the vehicle for providing sustainable funding and tweaking. We've seen those policy provisions move out and tweaking that funding. It doesn't do that. And because they haven't come up with a sustainable funding thing, we've got just enough to kind of keep things moving incrementally. So for transit funding, it will increase, but not dramatically. And the demand, as you would know, for cities across the country for, light rail, streetcars, other major transit initiatives, the backlog on that, the pipeline, far outstrips the ability to pay. So it's a multi-year process. It would be many years before they would be able to catch up to what's in the pipeline now, especially at the current funding level.
So, because in other words, they're not touching things like the gas tax formula or anything else.
They haven't touched the gas tax, but there is a promising provision in there that provides funding for pilots to study alternate transportation financing mechanisms. So basically VMT pilots, and I know, Minnesota's been looking at this as well. And so the goal there is to do regional or state pilots that would kind of look at all of the issues of what it would take to implement a VMT system. So rural versus urban, privacy, how do you deal with the technology,
interoperability.
Yeah. And so that, although, we're still in a pilot phase, so that certainly I'm not sure that we would get to a point where we could implement something by the end of this bill, but it's progress that it's been included and that at least there will be some funding for that kind of discussion.
Okay. All right.
Okay. And then just this last slide, the administration has continued, while Congress has struggled, the administration has continued to work to advance some of their policy initiatives. Housing is noted here. There are a number of initiatives that they've continued to try to advance. Additionally, they've been you probably have seen, been very aggressive on the environmental climate change agenda, which I didn't include on this, but, in preparation for the COP meeting, the climate change meeting in Paris coming up at the end of this month, they really have worked aggressively on the rules related to carbon emissions, on trying to get international buy-in and really set the stage, be a leader on climate change policy changes going into to that conference. And so that's been a very significant area where the administration has just worked independently through executive order and other mechanisms. And so looking ahead. Sorry.
Turn back
Do you want to talk about that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
If you want to turn back to that slide so I can just remember what was on it. So, so with the promise zones opportunity, I just wanted to understand a little bit more about that comment. And have there been identified funding opportunities that, and I don't do the grants work at the city, so maybe there's stuff we're applying for, but have there been identified opportunities that the promise zones are applying for today in terms of different funding streams?
So really what the promise zones offer, there are no newly funded promise zone programs that a city would apply for, or especially.
But you get a priority, right?
Exactly,
I thought that was the
and
whole
that's
point.
what it is.
Yeah.
It's really it's a priority position when you apply.
Okay, and I think Mr. Ranieri wanted to add something here.
Madam Chair and committee members, we did use a priority from the Promise Zone for a grant applied for by Hennepin County for lead-based paint, and they were able to use priority points for that. And then we're eligible to apply priority points for our application for body cams through the Department of Justice. However, the Department of Justice decided not to award any priority points. So it's been a mixed bag so far.
Okay.
Yeah. just to follow up, that as David just mentioned to me, that is the downside of not having legislative initiatives when you're doing these things, because there's no new funding created and you're trying to work within the construct that you already have.
Okay. And then with the new fair housing rule, do you want to just say a comment about that? Because we've been working a lot on.
Right. I'm going to invite my colleague David Gogol, because who really is our housing expert, to talk about fair housing.
Okay.
Hi, I'm David Gogol with Faegre BD Consulting. As you may know, the Department of Housing and Urban Development issued final rules on affirmatively advancing fair housing. Mm-hmm. You all are as knowledgeable about what's going on in that policy world as any place in America, with the complaint that's been filed against the city in St. Paul. It really is what is the future, I believe, for many cities as you struggle with how to balance programs that exist. If you were in graduate school, this would be terrific public policy issue to look at and to study. You have Title 42 with the tax credit law that says you must build in areas of concentration and poverty. And HUD saying you may not spend HUD money, overspend in areas of impaction and segregation. You have two federal policies that are diametrically opposed, and the cities are supposed to find the right balance. And that's what the future holds, because we have not had really the debate about that at the national level. It's been all done by rulemaking.
Right. And so in Minneapolis, we're taking some actions in response to our requirement to come up with an analysis of impediments that complies with this fair housing rules around segregation. One just related question I had, because you were talking about the appropriations, I'd be curious to kind of have a better picture of kind of spending by HUD over time, because there are so many areas that I feel like we depend on so much, whether you talk about enforcement assistance or the funding that goes to our Minneapolis Public Housing Authority, to assistance around the Section 8 program that we are just very, very challenged with, and I know we're not unique at all, and how to care for some of these assets as another example. So I'm not sure how HUD's going to come out in this appropriations balance, but it'd be good to kind of get a better picture of how our resources have been declining over time.
Well, you've described it exactly.
Mm-hmm.
HUD funding generally has been relatively flat. Section 8 in particular for the vouchers has been reduced by about 100,000 units across the country, which puts a strain on every community to meet the multiple needs of homeless and other low-income housing programs. So there's not a match between policy movement and funding.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm not seeing other questions.
And then just to conclude, between now and the end of the year, list here of legislation that we think may or will pass before the end of the year. So we're talking about, we'll see, or initiatives. I think we'll continue to see tax on the Affordable Care Act. We will see potential passage of a elementary and secondary school reauthorization bill, which would be the successor to No Child Left Behind. That's in conference now in the House and Senate. There's a raft of special tax initiatives that have to be extended every year. These go from research and development tax credits. There's a whole series of them, and potentially they're expiring, and we may or may not get them done before the end of the year. They have to pass the defense authorization bill. We certainly are going to see the transportation bill and the spending bills, and we may see some initiatives come up again on immigration related to the administration's executive action that's now under, the administration just filed to go back to court and have the Supreme Court actually to have a Supreme Court rule on that. So.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Bristol? Not seeing any. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you all. Pleasure being here, and we'll see you soon.
Yes,
Take
we
care.
really appreciate your work, in Washington, D.C., and we're glad you enjoy it.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Ranieri, any last words or other updates?
Madam Chair, I see no other updates from any of our staffs. No, we have nothing. No last words. Thank you.
All right. Well, with that, I guess I'll receive and file since we had a presentation, that presentation. And if we don't have that, we might want to just get that forwarded to the clerk and we'll be able to post that online. So on the motion to receive and file, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? And with that, we have concluded with our business and we are adjourned. Thank you very much.